All right, welcome back. Sorry about the technical delays there. We're doing critical human infrastructure, the role of technology in entrepreneurship, or maybe another way to describe this is how do you avoid being Kodak or Blockbuster, right? How can you innovate from within a big, successful company? Joining me to talk about this is Irvin Bishop Jr. He's the Chief Information Officer for Black & Veatch, the venerable engineering firm in the heartland. Christine Gulbranson, innovation strategist, renewable energy innovator, entrepreneur, author, engineering firm, incubators, accelerators. I think we're out of time now that we've done your title. So drive safely, everybody. Thank you very much. And Crystal Stiles, who is Director of Economic Development at Florida Power and Light. Good to have you all here to talk about innovating from within big companies. Crystal, I want to start with you. 35 Mules. Why 35 Mules? First of all, tell me what that is.
Yeah, so maybe we'll start there with what is 35 Mules.
Yeah.
So 35 Mules is NextEra Energy and FPL's internal innovation hub. It's the first of its kind that's powered by a global energy leader. We're really proud of it. We launched it early in 2020. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about the types of companies that we're growing there. But it's a way for our corporation to bring startups into the company, help us think bigger, challenge us to innovate in different ways, help us push the edges of the corporation, and ultimately grow their businesses into successful startups, which to bring that full circle, we focus very strongly on economic development across the state of Florida. And so planting those startups then here in Florida to grow is the ultimate goal of that entity.
So it's not like a X Combinator kind of thing, or Y Combinator, whatever combinator it is. You are kind of a corporate VC. Is that the way to think about it? And why would you do it that way as opposed to just innovating with your own people from within? What are the pros and cons on that?
Yeah, so it's not corporate VC, and it's not the only way that the company innovates. We do a lot of innovation internal with our employees. This is extra innovation. It's bringing other big minds into the corporation to think through their businesses, and in doing so, challenge us to think about the way that we do our business. So there's no investment in these companies. And to your question about Y Combinator, we're not an accelerator, and we're also not an incubator. That's why we call ourselves an innovation hub, because we're sort of a hybrid. And when we started thinking about structuring this, we looked at Y Combinator and Techstars and all of the leading startup support entities that were out there, and we purposefully built ourselves to be different. We didn't want to push these startups through in 15 weeks, and I'm not making any judgments on those programs. I think they're wonderful programs, and they certainly have a role in the startup ecosystem. But we wanted to spend a little bit more time with these companies, get to know them, really be inspired by them, and be challenged by them. We also didn't want to be an incubator that allowed them to stick around for 5 or 6 or 10 years. We wanted to build in some sense of urgency into the startup culture, right? So that they would make remarkable progress within about 12 to 18 months that they work with us, and then be ready to launch into the next segment. And many of them go on to be in other programs, other incubators, Techstars or Y Combinator, as a follow-on to our program.
So they physically come in the building and work with you, avail themselves of all the corporate resources. You don't invest in them. What's the end game there? If you like one of them, you might adopt or buy that technology. Is that it? Or invest, or you don't invest?
Yeah, so we give them $100,000 up front. It's a non-dilutive cash grant because we want them working on their business. A lot of startup founders have day jobs, and then they're working on this in their garage in the evenings, right? We want them to be on site in our corporate headquarters during the hours that our employees are there, because that's how we benefit from them. And we can more readily be available to advise them with our engineering expertise, our business acumen, if they're there, but if we're there during business hours. But we don't automatically invest up front. So it's $100,000. They have access to any of our 15,000 people around the company working on anything that they're interested in. And it could be that engineer that's working on a hydrogen pilot. It could be electrification. It could be water. It could be any technical issue that they're working on. Or it could just be, how do I hire people? And we have a very large HR team that works with our corporation. It could be, I don't understand how to set up QuickBooks, and we have a lot of accountants on staff. We have a lot of attorneys that can advise them. So it might be on the business side, it might be on the technical side. And then within 12 to 18 months, they've moved to the next stage of business. If we like them along the way, we certainly have mechanisms that can unlock additional investment in these companies. Whether it be follow-on to other external VC that they're trying to capture, or becoming a customer. There's a lot of different outcomes that can happen throughout the process.
How many companies have applied? How many do you select? And do you try to stick in the energy sector typically, or is it beyond that?
Yeah, so we are on our second cohort now. We worked with 6 companies in our first cohort. We're working with 7 companies now. We had hundreds apply, and they go through a very rigorous selection process that takes about 5 months. So it's a long time from the time they apply until they're accepted. And it's because it's super competitive. We have over 100 employees from around the company that look at each one of their applications, and ultimately they pitch our CEO, and they're selected from a very small group of finalists that get to pitch our CEO. And so we have found that has helped us to identify the absolute best startups. And actually, I want to just give a quick shout out to Caleb Tristan in the back with Yuga Power. He's one of our first graduates from the original 6 cohort. But we found that helps us attract the best startups to the program. If you're going to relocate to Juno Beach, Florida, to work with the world's largest renewable energy company, it's probably because you're in the energy space, but it's not a requirement of the program. And we actually have a number of companies that aren't working on sort of traditional energy solutions. So while most of them are in the energy space, you don't have to be.
So I certainly get what they get out of it. I'm not exactly sure what you guys are getting out of it. What does it do for FPL?
Yeah, so one of the most important selection criteria has nothing to do with the technology. It has everything to do with the founders and how we feel when we talk to them. If we feel inspired in that 5-minute pitch and the 90-second video that they have to submit as part of their application, they already have a leg up on somebody who may have better technology. Because we're going to be spending a lot of time with these individuals, and we want to feel inspired. We want them to challenge us to think bigger. And so that's what we get from it. We get employees who spend an hour with a founder and sees a different way of thinking about a problem, thinks a little differently about the challenges that are sitting on their desk when they go back, and are inspired to innovate. And so you asked earlier, I think, about why would we do this instead of innovating in the company? And I think this is how we innovate in the company. We're talking with these startups, we're meeting with them, and they're inspiring us to think differently. And we go back to our desks, and now we're all innovating. Innovation at Nextera is very and purposefully decentralized. There's no one person in charge of innovation at our company. Everybody is responsible for innovation at our company.
Irvin, you're working at Black & Veatch. You came from Coca-Cola in Atlanta. And your mission at Black & Veatch is to engage in a digital transformation. It seems like coming from a consumer product company like Coca-Cola to a company that builds nuclear plants, that would be an easy job. These are all really smart, technical people and would get it immediately. Has it been a challenge nonetheless?
Well, it definitely has been a challenge in that some differences our digital technology and engineering technology is pretty different in our way.
Explain that. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So if you are putting in the infrastructure for a water plant or a power plant, all that work, engineering technology, that's typically not done by my team in the CIO office. However, once those assets are in place, if you want to monitor those assets, put sensors on those assets, create IoT, digital twins of those assets, that's where we get involved. So the engineering focus is a lot different than the sort of digital focus. The other thing is, from a marketing company, Coca-Cola, they focus on the consumer aspect a lot differently. So we look at things like the 4 Ps, product, placement, promotion, pricing. We focus on STP, segmentation, how we segment our customers, the targeting, what's the target market, how we're going to position the products. That's sort of the lifeblood of a Coca-Cola. And in an engineering company, we're providing critical human infrastructure. So different focus. We still want to focus on the customer, have them first, but the two are very different.
The bar is in a little different place, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you're kind of giving engineers a new design requirement in a way. As they think about a project,
Yes.
you want to bake in a digital component to it. Do
Absolutely.
they push back on this at all?
Well, I don't think it's a pushback. It's more, in most companies that don't have engineers, the IT team are the technical gurus. But when I'm sitting down with engineers, they're like, listen, we're very technical. So you have to help them understand, and you have to first listen, what's there with them, right? You have to help them understand what's in it for them. And so what we do with digital is show how the engineering work that they're doing can be significantly enhanced if they think about it from a digital perspective as well. So, we talked about assets that are in a particular system, whether it's a water system or it's an electrification system. But when I look at that, I think about how can we take those critical human infrastructure components and really emphasize them in a way so that you can now predict and tell your clients from a monitoring and diagnostics perspective when this thing is going to be problematic. It's beautiful, it works, it's engineered correctly, but I want to enhance that from a digital perspective.
So ultimately, this makes for safer engineering projects. Is that the idea?
Well, it's not just safer. Safer is one component, but it just gives you predictive capability. It helps them make better decisions. When I think of engineering, it's making things work better, right? When I think of digital, it's really taking data. So data is not the new oil. I think for digital, data is the soil that all digital grows in. So when we think about those engineering projects, when we overlay digital to those, it really raises the bar, allows us to offer more to our clients and to give them an enhanced sort of solution.
I'm sorry, data is the soil in which...
Yeah, so...
Do that again, I like that line.
Okay, so...
You can use that in your next book.
Well,
go ahead, one more time.
Yeah, so digital's not the new oil, right? So everyone's looking for the next oil thing, right?
Right,
But
right.
digital is the soil. Data is the soil that digital grows in.
Data is the, okay, I like that. So this is a 106-year-old engineering company. They build all kinds of big, complicated, mission-critical things, and they probably think they know their stuff pretty well. And you come in and start telling them to do other things.
Yes.
What's that like, trying to change such an embedded corporate culture?
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I'll say is, if you go in listening, right, not telling, so asking engineers what's important to them, really understanding the voice of the customer, what are our clients trying to do, and then helping them clearly understand how the slant and perspective that you're looking at is going to be value add for them, they listen. And so I'll tell you, back in 1995, this guy, you probably heard of him, John Cotter. It has an organizational change management perspective that he uses on things. And so it's really starting by creating a sense of urgency, helping them understand how important this digital component is to their engineering component. It goes through then 8 different phases and ends with institutionalizing this change and making it part of their business. So we're not just sort of shooting from the hip. There's a very systematic approach that we're using to help engineers understand the importance of digital in the solution.
But it's been a little bit of a uphill battle, or...
I wouldn't say an uphill
Once
battle.
you explain it to them, they're in?
Well, it's storytelling, right? So I come from Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
So we're about telling stories.
Absolutely.
So once you tell the story to help them really understand the value to our end customers, right? We're customer-centric. And while they're putting this infrastructure component in place, ultimately, we want to serve our customers, consumers. When they understand how what you're proposing is going to help the goal, they're in.
All right. So, Christine, let's talk about companies and how they progress. You've written a lot about this. Is it inevitable that as companies get successful, they lose that spark of innovation because, after all, they're making a ton of money on something they innovated a generation or so ago? I love the story about Kodak, somebody discovering the digital camera and then panicking and putting it on a shelf because they wouldn't be selling any Kodachrome anymore. How do you avoid that in big companies?
Well, I think you have to think ahead. And so in a lot of the companies that I wrote about in the book, staying inside the Fortune 100, they had what was called corporate VCs, right? That was part of their innovation tool chest, so to speak. Those people that were looking on the roadmap of down the road of what is coming into the future, what perhaps we can't do internally right now because we have to answer to the shareholders, and we've got our quarterly reports to make, but we want to look at to what's the future and what potentially we should be investing in, what we might want to acquire, and look at all those different venues of what is it that we need to succeed and not become complacent, right? Because a lot of companies just become complacent. I believe we spoke before when I was working with Sony, and Sony, the head of engineering, Taiki, said to me, he's like, "You see that CRT over there?" He's like, "That's our cash cow." And you would think we want to stay with that cash cow. But given your research and what you've done with flat panel displays, we know that's where the future is, right? And e-ink. And we know we have to invest in that, and we have to slowly get away from our cash cow and start to build up the flat panel display unit.
That's a hard thing for Sony to do, I imagine.
It is, right? And you get a lot of pushback from your board of like, just stay with that. You're making tons of money, and we're good with that. But you want to be successful and you want to be around in the future, right? And Sony has a very strong, with Jen, very strong leading in their corporate VC unit in Austin.
How much of this, I don't want to overstate it, maybe a little bit of timidity to take a risk in a big corporation, how much of that has to do with the pressures of quarterly earnings reports and the equity markets and showing constant growth? Is that an inhibitor for innovation inside big corporations, and how do you fix that?
I think sometimes it is, because you're more worried about answering to your shareholders, and you have to think beyond that. I was just speaking with the CEO of Goodyear, right? And he said, we're a really old company, and we have to think about how are we going to succeed in the future. And what is that? That's mobility, right? And we need to start investing in mobility and understanding what components are needed for those type of tools and devices that are being invented, that we're there and we're not going to be left behind.
There's a lot of good ideas in big corporations that don't percolate to the top like they should. They die a slow death in the committees along the way.
Because there's too many committees.
Yeah, and the bureaucracy of these corporations, it's almost inevitable. You really have to fight hard to avoid it. It was interesting hearing Bracken saying he had 23 direct reports. Not many corporations are that flat. And it's difficult, in a company the size of, say, Coca-Cola to do that. So how do you create an environment where those good ideas can get the light of day?
Well, we found that it actually has to be driven by the executive team, the CEO specifically, and
This is
the
from
board.
the top. This is from the
It has to be driven by the top, but it has to be an organic movement from the bottom up and the middle up, right? So you have to allow people to be creative, which is a huge discussion today, right, about curiosity. Curiosity drives innovation, and you need to allow that ability for your people to have that flexibility to try. And it's, like Bracken said, I don't really like to use failure, but it's okay to fail, because you will never grow and succeed and innovate if you don't try it and fall on your face a few times.
Yeah, well, you're saying amen to that one.
Yeah, I was saying amen because she's just spot on. We've created a culture of not something we've patented, but it's from Gartner's called 3F, fail forward fast. So we create that so we have lots of at-bats. If it doesn't work, let's fail real quick on it. Well, we either think you either win or learn, right? And so when we attempt to do something, if it doesn't work, we pivot or we try something else. When we find those things that do work, then we extend them and we scale them and we do it quickly. So I totally agree with the perspective.
So it's interesting, though, because that approach, fail forward fast, makes a lot of sense, except when you're building a nuclear power plant. You don't want to do too much of that, right? So how do you drive the engineering ethos, which understandably is conservative as it should be, with that?
Yeah, so there's a model that lots of companies use, and it's a 70-20-10 model. So the nuclear plant would fall in the 70%. And what that is we call it the brilliant basics. It's the blocking and tackling. It's the things that engineers love most, making sure it works, making sure it's right. Then there's the 20% that you use that's optimization, doing things faster, cheaper, better. And then there's that 10% of innovation or transformation work you do. So you need to label your work. Your budget needs to be reflective of that as well. So you still make sure that the innovation is there, and you don't just focus on the 70%, but you do that by understanding the work, making sure you know what's in what category, and you don't neglect that just because you have to make sure the nuclear power plant works every time.
All right. Well, running a utility is not unlike that, too. There's mission-critical kind of stuff. Utilities, by their nature, have to be conservative about a lot of things in order to keep the lights on. That said, how has Florida Power and Light fostered a sense of innovation, and whether it's fail forward fast or whatever term you use, to bring good ideas to the surface?
Sure. I think you make a really good point. Utilities are not typically known for being innovative, right? We all want the lights to be on today in this convention center, and that is our 70%.
Yeah.
Whether it be nuclear, natural gas, whatever our source of energy is, that falls into our 70%. But at the same time, we don't want to be Kodak. We always want to be looking forward, right? And we want to identify those new transformative technologies that are going to help all of us realize a cleaner energy future. So, for example, our hydrogen pilot that's happening right down the road in Okeechobee County, we sort of do a toe in the water approach. So that might be your 10%. We label it toe in the water at FPL and at NextEra. And, it really gives us the ability to start small, to pilot something, to listen to our customers, to understand how it impacts our broader initiatives, and then be able to go fast once we decide to adopt it. And so we have a number of internal mechanisms within the corporation to make sure that those ideas don't get killed, because there are a lot of nuclear engineers that just like to do things the way they've always done them, and they should. But we run Shark Tanks, which is a great way for our employees to bring awesome new ideas forward and receive coaching similar to the coaching that we provide inside 35 Mules to our external startups. We run hackathons. So, we go to external sources to solve problems that we may have. And we also run quality competitions. So, bring us an improved process. Bring us something that you have changed that's made our company better. And we reward employees for it.
So this is not your father's power generation company, is it? It's a different way of thinking about it. I mean, utilities historically have been, regulated enterprise, the safe investment bet, go for the dividends, et cetera. I don't think many do what you're describing here. Why is FPL pushing in this direction?
Well, we're not a utility. We are a technology company that happens to sell energy. And we are willing to embrace whatever technology it takes to get our job done. So drone technology, we have recently adopted drones, and we have one of the largest groups of pilots on staff in the state of Florida, because it's much more affordable, efficient, and reliable to fly drones to look at power lines, to look at damage after a storm. We can get in there with technology before we can get people in there. We use autonomous technology, artificial intelligence. Cybersecurity has huge implications for what we're doing. So data privacy, we are all about technology that helps us work smarter, not harder, but keep the lights on.
So Christine, this idea of an innovation hub, bringing outside ideas kind of in, is an interesting twist on an old idea, which it used to be, Bell Labs or Xerox PARC. You had these huge investments internally in these big corporations, and they just tell these scientists to go off and think big thoughts, and maybe a product will come out of it, or maybe not. And that was all kinds of amazing things that we use and take for granted today came out of just those two labs. But those days are gone. Corporations don't do that anymore. Is that good, bad, or indifferent in your view?
Well, I think they just do it in a different way. Right? They look more towards outsourcing. And so instead of having it on the bottom line of their P&L, they outsource. They invest in other companies that they think might be good for a BU, right, to bring it in, to acquire that, or they look for some type of new product that they could purchase and they test it out, kind of like, what FPL is doing, right? They test things out first. And you want to go ahead and continue to do that. You kind of de-risk a little bit, to be quite honest, right? You're placing some bets. There are some corporations that actually pure bottom line invest for financial returns, but most invest for growth and innovation for the future for their corporations.
I guess the advantage, and it's probably an anachronism, but the advantage of the Bell Labs or the Xerox PARC was just kind of this unlimited resources just to go and do what you want to do. It's a little harder when you're on your own as a startup trying to come up with an idea. Are we losing great ideas in this process? I know that's a completely hypothetical question, but what's your speculation?
I think there are a lot of great ideas out there. I think that entrepreneurs will continue to be entrepreneurs and to innovate, and corporations just need to play with them in the sandbox, right? And they need to work hand in hand with them. And I think that's why a lot of entrepreneurs, they don't know how to access corporations. And the corporations need to make it more easy to access them and to work with them. And so I think what FPL is doing great, right? Bringing them in, giving them access to employees. Whereas, most entrepreneurs are sitting on the outside and like, I'd really love to, have you as a customer, right? But how do I get to you? And it takes years and many months, and they don't have the funds to do that.
Irvin, you told me when we talked earlier that a lot of these young startup type people, they don't even know how to talk to a big company, do they?
Well,
I mean, you walk into Coca-Cola and you want to sell them an idea. What do you have to do?
well, first, you have to not tell them about all the technical aspects of your product.
Don't be an engineer.
Right, because no one cares, right? So you talk to
This goes
them.
back to the whole humanities idea. We need more humanities people out there.
There you go. There you go.
Anyway,
Right.
go ahead.
Well, we talk to them in customer journeys, user stories, epics, right? Talk to them about how users are going to be impacted by your product. Another thing you were talking earlier that sort of struck a chord, that is tough for engineers. Sometimes, not all engineers, but some, they have what I call an NIH syndrome, right? Not invented here. Mm-hmm. So when you're bringing these ideas in from the outside, they're like, wait, we're engineers. I mean, we know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so being a part of projects like we use in Ignite X process that we have, where we have lots of innovative startups that come in and have new ideas, especially in the CIO office, this is a culture, right? We are here to innovate. And having the support of our CEO and our presidents, we're able to bring those ideas and to influence the culture to say, we are doing this. It's not, if we don't, to be quite frank, we're going to be disrupted. Either you're a disruptor or you're going to be disrupted. Blockbuster, same thing, right?
Well, so I mean, is that a real thing in the world of engineering? Are there potential disruptions for people who build bridges?
Listen, what I'll tell you is this: a lot of the work that's done in the engineering space, over time, and people may throw tomatoes, but I think some of that work is going to be commoditized.
Really?
And we're going to have gig economy work that breaks down the gigs that they're working on into packages that can be done by individuals. So you don't have to have engineers that have been there 30, 40 years doing that work. We have to think ahead, and by 2026, there's supposed to be a 300% increase in disabled workers coming into our workforce. So one of the ways we're going to be ready for that at Black and Veatch is we're thinking about how can we utilize this workforce that's coming in. How can we use them for autonomous vehicles? How can we use them for all sorts of things? So that means our infrastructure has to be set up. Our websites have to be ADA compliant. We have to be thinking about what's happening. And so taking those digital components, comparing them with the engineering components will help us be ready to exploit all the mega trends and things that are happening in our space.
Crystal, when people come in and pitch your CEO, some of these startups, do they make colossally funny mistakes, or are they usually pretty good? And you don't have to tell names, but I'd love to hear a few stories.
I think that's a great question. And, you were asking about how startups should talk to corporations. I would challenge the corporations to be more ready to talk to the startups, too, right? We sort of have to meet in the middle, and it is a very different language. So I guess what I would say is by the time they get to the point where they're pitching, our executive panel and our CEO, they're generally sort of at the top of the heap. And so the mistakes tend to happen during that 90-second application video that we ask for. We ask for them not to exceed 90 seconds, and we get 16-minute videos sometimes with all of the technical virtues of their product. We ask
They
them
need a
to,
producer.
Right. We ask them to show all of their founders, and sometimes that happens, and other times it doesn't. But by the time they get to that pitch, but what I'll say is we spend a lot of time from day one until graduation day working on refining that pitch. We do storytelling workshops with them. We, to make sure that they know not only the technical ins and outs of their product, but the story around it. The why. Why should I care? How is this going to change the world? How is this going to impact you, my prospective customer? We work them through that. We get them to the point where they have marketing videos, and at the end of 18 months, we ask them to pitch from the stage to all of our employees. And all of them, whether they were good, great, or bad in the beginning, are spectacular by the end because of that effort that they put in. But it is something that they all have to focus on because they're so into the weeds of the technical piece. And I think a lot of the times that's why they need an incubator, they need an accelerator program, is to help them. Inventors are inventors. They're not necessarily business people. They don't necessarily know how to build a strong business. And so giving them the tools to take that amazing invention and monetize it into something that's marketable and is meeting the need of the market, I think is some of the gaps that we can fill as companies. So
you're really telling them how to tell stories that they aren't naturally well suited to do because they're so deep in the weeds. Is that essentially it?
Yeah, I think they're so focused on the technicalities of their product, of their solution, that sometimes you have to encourage them to step back at the 30,000 foot a little bit and tell the story. Why is this changing the world? Why is this important? Why should I care if I'm not involved in the startup?
You know, that's something, Edison was pretty good at that, at connecting with people, cultivating members of the press, telling his story. Christine, do you see this is this a fundamental problem is it a problem in big corporations? Is it a problem for startups? And is this, I always think about how we're taught in school. I feel like the technical people go one way and the humanities people go the other way. And except for Bracken, no one meets in the middle, right? And we end up with a lot of, gearheads who can't.
We need to meet in the middle.
Yeah, no, we have gearheads who can't communicate and people communicate who don't understand the basics of science, and that's a problem.
It was the same thing I experienced when I was Chief Innovation Officer of the University of California system, where I had all these thousands of entrepreneurs and I had them create these videos and tell us your story. Tell us what you're working on.
They don't know their story, do they?
Oh, wow. I had to work with them a lot. I had one faculty member from Berkeley in my office, and she was doing a new robotics company, and she was like 27 years at Berkeley, and she said, I'm going to go pitch Samsung later today. And I said, okay, show me your pitch. Okay, you know what? And I went outside and I said to my assistant, please just cancel the next hour. I'm going to sit down with her and let's just go through your pitch. Okay, nope, let's do this. Let's move this around. And she's like, wow, okay. I said, so let me know when you're done with Samsung this afternoon. Let me know how it went. She wrote back and she's like, oh my gosh, it was so good. They loved it. But that's what you have to do. You have to give them that guidance and that mentorship of helping them along to what is it really you want to say? Do you really want to say that? I'm not sure.
Irvin, people that operate out of both sides of the brain are rare, aren't they? I mean, the people that understand the technicalities and can tell the story, that's a rare thing. And it does need to be taught to a lot of people, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. So now, especially in the technical space, people are no longer classifying themselves as sort of CIOs.
I'm not ignoring you.
No worries.
Questions,
but sort of marketects.
Keep talking while you got a cover for me, Irvin.
Marketects, you need to be able to speak the technology language and talk to the bean counters, but you also need to be able to talk to the business people, understand what the voice of the customer is. If you can't do that and you're a CIO, you won't last very long. So CIO will stand for career is over if you don't figure out how to be more of a business person.
Am I still on? Oh, there I am. Yeah. So, Christine, a little more about when you were the CIO of the University of California. Bureaucracy is one thing. Bureaucracy with academia, it's scary, right? So, how does that all work out? How were you able to? I mean, on the one hand, academics are supposed to be forward-thinking people, but they are very traditional types,
Super traditional.
Yeah.
Super traditional. And I came in and I rocked the boat. For one, I cleaned up the division that I inherited straight away. Nobody had done that in 12 years, so, didn't have a nice
Hopefully
name on campus.
nobody had tenure, I hope.
Well, yeah.
That gets hard, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it was more union that I had to deal with, but I figured out ways.
Tenured person with union representation, forget it,
Yeah, but you have to just say, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to just do what I think is right and I'll ask for forgiveness later if I make people upset, right? So you just have to go and do it. And I think I kind of became the venture capital business unit within the academic setting of everybody came to me. And you just have to kind of go with your background and having that different lens of perspective of coming into academia, even though I grew up within the academic system and went out and did venture capital, was an entrepreneur, and coming back with those different lenses of seeing things, of being able to look at the technologies that were coming my way, CRISPR, what are different ways that we could utilize CRISPR, for instance, since I manage that. How do we look at things from a different lens perspective and be creative about how it, like Bracken said earlier today, how can it be applied to a different industry?
Well, so you were really a unicorn in that operation, weren't you?
I was one of 5 in the U.S., yes.
I mean, really? And would you describe yourself as successful in that role, or was it too challenging? I mean, you talked about one of your bosses being, we won't mention names, but
Yes.
not quite getting it, right?
Yes, and quite a few of the executive team not getting it. And let's just say I had a lot of resistance when I came in, because if you imagine, the University of California had 10 campuses, 3 national laboratories, a statewide ag and natural resource group. So there was a lot of different people with a lot of different views and opinions. And some of those campuses wanted to be siloed. Leave us alone. We know how to do innovation. We don't know why we need you. And others are like, the smaller campuses like Merced, please help us, help us. But at the end, after I had all this resistance for the first couple of years, and I created this system-wide effort where I brought in a lot of corporations and a lot of investments into our technologies, they said, you know what, we couldn't have done this without you. Thank you. And so that was like, okay, so all this sleepless nights for the last 2 years was worth it.
All right. Question.
Great, thanks. Clint Robinson from Black & Veatch. We spend a lot of time talking about how we do things. I think Miles alluded to, sometimes we get caught in the technical. And 2 years ago, Crystal, at Black & Veatch, we changed from 60% of our business in energy, which was carbon-based fuels, to an entirely renewable energy design. And what I tell people is that as much as you want to pat us on the back, it wasn't because we saw that future. It's because our client at NextEra and Florida Power and Light saw that future. And what an incredible shift to move from a carbon-based economy to a renewable platform, while at the same time being able to provide base load for everybody's device, right? Can you explain to us a little bit about that transformation at Florida Power and Light and NextEra into this renewable platform that you've created?
Well, I'll do my best. I've only been with the company for 10 years, and we were well into our transformation when I joined the company. But, we have been making investments for probably 30 years now to move in this direction. We were building wind around the country when nobody really understood wind at all. And now we're the largest producer of wind energy in the world, in 49 states and Canada. Nobody told us that we had to blow up all of our coal plants and replace them with natural gas plants. We felt like it was the right thing to do. And we started doing that before we even truly, I think, fully understood the implications of the world as we now know it today. And nobody incentivized us to do that. And I think that's a really important thing for many corporations to think about. We did the right thing because it's part of our corporate values, and it doesn't always make financial sense at the beginning. When we started building solar, it wasn't inexpensive. And now it is, and it took us many years of building really large, really expensive, really inefficient solar facilities to get to the point where we are today, where we now own and operate 50 facilities across the state of Florida and are going to triple that in the next short while. So it has been a transformation, but even 30 years ago, we weren't thinking about things like hydrogen. And I've mentioned it a few times now, but hydrogen, we really believe, can unlock a truly carbon-free, clean energy future for all of us. And so we have launched this small 10-megawatt pilot to help us understand how it's going to impact our grid, how hydrogen can now fuel those natural gas facilities, so even weaning us off of that. But I think it was 20 years ago, we were, at FPL, we were the largest importer of oil in this country. And today, the only oil that we have on our system is required for us to have and burn and prove to the federal government that we can burn it in our natural gas plants in the event of an emergency.
Well, let's give her a round of applause. That's awesome. That's great. So, Crystal, this is all great, but we want more. When are we going to have a fully renewable grid, baseload power, the whole thing with hydrogen or whatever storage? Can we do that quickly enough to meet the goals of Paris or 2050, or pick your deadline? Can you move fast enough?
I think we are moving in that direction as fast as we can. I think there are some interesting innovations that we still need to fully unlock that. I think hydrogen is key to that. But if you think about just battery technology, you all are sitting not far from the world's largest battery storage system. And it allows us to dispatch solar energy on our grid when the sun is not shining, which has allowed us now to look at solar energy as a firm power resource. We've always needed a backup resource for solar power because, even in Florida, we have these wonderful, beautiful, blue, sunny days, but there are big, poofy clouds that sometimes go across the sky, and you can watch the usage of a solar facility just plummet, even when that one cloud goes across it. And so, we can't afford to have our customers not have power, have brownouts, have insufficient power quality. And so, batteries has allowed us to unlock the true potential of solar energy. So I think as that technology continues to improve, as we truly understand how to unlock hydrogen in our future, then yes, I think we will definitely accomplish a fully clean energy future.
We have a question.
Rather a comment, two comments. One on outsourcing that Christine, you talked about, and storytelling. Nowadays, I have been working with few corporations to actually showing them it is a lot cheaper to do innovations within the company rather than spinning out. At least in high tech, you propose something within the company, nobody listens, you go out, you start up, and then 2, 3, 4 years later, you buy them for $1 billion. That's not very economical. And the best thing is to have the small startup type of mentality where you farm out a small company in a corner of a building, take everything, all the policies, procedures, bureaucracies out, and let them innovate. And I have a personal example. When I was at Intel, I had a IoT platform innovation that I tried to sell internally for about a year and a half, and everybody was saying, I'm focused on quarterly revenue. Till I got 10 minutes with the CEO, and I didn't bring any technical details. As you said, Irvin, I told him a story in a 5-minute. And after about 10 minutes, he said, I got it, how much money you need. I gave him a fairly large dollar, millions of dollars of figures. He said, you got the money, make it happen. So at the end of the day, I want to support the story that you have to come out and appeal to people in a storytelling fashion. And most CEOs assume that you know the technical details. You have enough brains to figure that out. But do you have a compelling problem statement that you're trying to solve? So, sorry, I didn't ask a question. I just wanted to share my personal experience on both of those terms.
But I think it is dependent on who you're telling the story to, right? The difference between the CFO versus the CEO.
Yeah,
That was a good story, by the way.
it was.
So what's your general take on, all three of you now, on innovation inside established corporations? Is it alive and well and healthy, just iterating in a different way? Irvin, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'll say, Miles, it's yes and, right? So I think we're not taking a single-threaded approach. We have a digital advisory, we have a growth accelerator within Black & Veatch, and it's just the things that this gentleman talked about. It's very, there are no guardrails, right? They are innovating, there's no red tape, they go to it and they get it done. But we also are coming to places like Edison Awards, right? And talking with other innovative companies that are doing bleeding edge work, partnering with them and figuring out how we can innovate that way. And a third process is, I talked about not invented here. I am all the time talking to startups and new companies, figuring out how they do work and figuring out how we can either bring them in the company, merge and acquire the companies, figuring out what's best. So I think you need to have innovation within the company. You need to look externally at innovation partners. And you also need to just look for innovation. Everyone does innovation, not just the chief innovation officer or the chief digital officer. I want sales, marketing, supply chain, legal, everyone to have an innovation hat on, as someone sort of said earlier.
Did we mention the title of your book? Did we plug your book properly?
Transformative innovation. Yeah, I think I'll be
Wasn't
signing
sure.
some
Just wanna
books
make
after,
sure everybody's out there in
after
case you wanna
this.
read her
So
book. It's-
please come out and see
Yeah,
me if you'd
check
like
it
the
out.
book.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll sign it for you or something.
Yeah.
And sign your Kindle, right?
Oh,
Anyway.
sure. You want me to sign your
Sharpie.
iPad there?
Yeah, anyway, so tell us, is innovation alive and well in this country?
I think innovation is. I think, within corporations, it also depends on who's driving innovation from top, where the innovation team reports to. Do they report to the head of R&D? Do they report to the CFO? Do they report to the CEO? There's a lot of different stories that show how some are really successful depending on who they report to. And so I think a lot of corporations are still trying to figure it out, to be quite honest. Some are knocking it out of the park, and some are still trying, should we try this, should we try that, tweak it and iterate. Innovation's alive and well everywhere, right? We've got entrepreneurs galore that want to change the world and change the world for the better, especially within the renewable space and energy and carbon drawdown, people that are passionate, and that never is going to go away. We just need to figure out how to best harness it and succeed from the two different types of groups working together.
Crystal, we innovated our way into the climate crisis. We're going to have to innovate our way out of it, and you guys are on the front lines. Do you feel confident?
Sure, Miles. I think that is a question that is well beyond my pay grade. But what I would say is it's encouraging to be able to see it from the inside. I think being a part of the solution at NextEra gives me confidence that just like we have completely gone away from oil and coal and other fossil fuels, and we're building the cleanest grid in the country right here in Florida. I know that other companies are going to join us and help us do that and accomplish that across the country, and then it's ultimately going to have to happen across the world. But it's not a one company solution. It's not even a 10 company solution. It's a very large global solution that needs to be enacted.
All right, that's going to be the last word. Crystal, Christine, Irvin, thank you, all three of you. Really interesting conversation. Give them a round of applause. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we have a real treat. We're going to see meet the winners of the Young Edison Challenge, sponsored by the Charlotte Community Foundation. So you want to be here for that. 5-minute break. We'll be back. Thanks for being with us.